but like, how am I going to afford it? Like, how do you ever excel at anything, from this point? It just seemed like a dead end, and I just racked my brain on it. And a lot of it though came down to over and over again in my head that I needed to figure out a way to be able to get paid while I'm sleeping. There's the only way, because if it's these retail hours that I'm tied to, I can't do it. And I'm not seeing my kid, and I'm not seeing my wife ever. I'm working as much as I possibly can, trying to keep open a local business and living in Orange County. And, and so that extra $300 a month though, at that point, like I was like, hey, that would take care of at least, a little bit of breathing room. Like, so if I could do that, let's do it. So I'd hit all the motorcycle swap meets I could, like in Long Beach. Every time like Costa Mesa Speedway would let me out, the Oxleys let me come out there and sell my stuff at Speedway, do that, do anything that I could, any extra event that I could, just to get some cash in my pocket. And it started seeming like, things are turning, and the brand awareness was happening. Instagram was just getting big, and using those social tools as much as I could. I remember so many people telling me at the time, like, this just seems like such a waste of time, dude. Like, you're putting so much into this. And I had one friend that told me, he's just like, you're just relentless, man. Like, you just never stop. And that always stuck with me, that, it's just that I had to embody that completely and never stop. And it had to be something. It couldn't be anything without giving everything, and you gotta give it your all. So at that time, it started making sense that, hey, if we move out of state, maybe, kind of lower the overhead a little bit, allow me to give this thing a little bit more of my time, then like, we might be able to do something out of it. So, we decided to move to Gilbert, Arizona. Awesome schooling for the kids. It's a nice, safe area. It's pretty religious area. But the schools are phenomenal, the public schooling system. And we're like, maybe this is a place that we need to raise our kids, and, we'll be able to buy a house and be able to get a little bit more space. And with a little bit more space, like, my big thing was like, if we had a loft, I could have like Dixxon headquarters instead of in the garage right now, and we basically, we made that jump. And I think a very important part to really point out in this part of that story is that a lot of people ask me these days, like, how do you like Arizona? Like, I'm thinking about moving. I've been thinking about it for years, but it never seems like the right time. Or I need to get out there, but it's so hard. And it's like, just like in business, just like making the jump, just like anything that you do, and this move is a prime example. You have to simplify those terms down so much. And when you simplify everything, I looked at it as like, hey, guess what? This weekend I'm taking off. We're going to Gilbert. Like, we're going there. I'm walking into a Harley dealership. Do I want to work at Harley? No, absolutely not. But, it's like, that's what I know how to do. So walk into Harley, with my experience, I get a job probably at the first one. If not, there's like 5 more of them. We'll figure it out. And walk in there, nail the job interview. They're going to make a spot for me. I start in 3 weeks, go find a place to rent that weekend, and then basically go home, sell everything I can to make sure that we could afford the move, and then, and come out and create the new life. And, it's hard work, and, it takes everything you got at the time. But when you simplify it down like that, it's like, hey, any of us could do that. Anybody could go in there and make that happen, right?
Yeah, Danny, I want to clarify. I love where your story's headed. I want to clarify a couple things. So you had a shop with your dad. You start selling flannels out of your car on the side just to make $300. How'd you come up with the number? How did you know you wanted $300? Why wasn't it 2 or 8?
To be honest with you, it just felt like, dude, if I had $300, like that was freed up, like that would make all the difference in just being able to have enough to spread across the month after food, bills, everything else that we had.
Yeah.
So it was like, so it was a super random number, but it just felt like, I think it felt obtainable.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, you know what I'm saying? Because when we made our first set of tags, I thought I was going all in, getting 100, because I thought that was going to last us a whole year.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't really, it's hard to quantify at that time. Like, how many of these can we sell? What is a market at this point? What can you do? And I was just very young and naive. Like didn't really, understand at that point, what, I don't know, like how much you could really get out there.
Well,
I'd never met anyone who had any kind of e-commerce, business or anything like that really.
Mm-hmm. I love the number because it is so obtainable. I was coaching somebody yesterday. I do some life coaching, and I was explaining to them if they could just shave off $300 off their bills, that would be extra money in their pocket, right? When you have those obtainable numbers, they become real, and once that becomes real, then you turn that 300 into 4, and then you double it into 8, and then it compounds from there. So I was interested how you came up with that, and you said you went on this research mission to find a good flannel. It's so intuitive of you to think about that. I mean, is it a secret where you found them, or do you have somebody start making them for you?
No,
because they're good flannels.
Yeah. So it's funny because that's kind of a rocky part of the story where, so when we started, I had a buddy of mine who had a clothing company, and so he would help me out with like getting shirts screen printed and whatnot, just for branding purposes. But he was like, hey, there's this place in downtown, downtown LA in the fashion district where I know you could get these, because I was like, hey, there's this one flannel that I really like, but I could never find them. And I was like, you find them all over in like t-shirt stores, like outlet kind of stores. Mm-hmm. And I was like, whenever I see them, like I grab a bunch of them. I was like, but they have certain qualities about them that are better than these other ones, and I don't know why. I didn't know anything about material composition at the time, or, different fabrics and whatnot. I knew like what I liked and what I didn't like, and what I could figure out would get ruined, when we wash it and whatnot. So what I found out was that I contacted this company, and I talked to them. I was like, hey, you know what? If I could rebrand these, I feel like I could sell a lot. I mean, I don't know how many, but I felt like I could. And they were like, well, we're kind of thinking about getting out of it. So that's the reason why you see them sometimes. Sometimes you don't. We sell a lot of different clothes and blah, blah, blah. And the fashion district is actually, is when people hear that story, like they don't really like that, because you could find that somewhere for cheaper, right? Mm-hmm. It's, basically you're paying for a brand name at that point. But essentially that's the way fashion works, as far as like women would be much more used to that, because like that's how boutiques work. They go and they find all that stuff. And it's not really their brand actually. And then they make it their own brand or whatever. And that's part of their job, is finding those things. And like Volcom started out very similar to that. So when I heard that, I was like, okay, well, maybe I could do that. So I started telling this company that, and then before you know it, and basically, so what we do is like, we would get those, I'd get them back, and I'd unpackage them all. And my friend, I had a bunch of tags made, and my friend's girlfriend would sew them in by hand. Wow. And then that's basically how we got those out. Now, as that gained popularity, I was getting like moving trucks sent to my house full of these from downtown LA. Uh-huh. And it was the amount of work that it took to do that was incredible. I mean, like you're talking, by the time that I moved to Arizona, I was basically I had an alterations place here owned by this older lady. Her name was Fatima. And she like almost became like a grandma to me, because I'd see her almost every day. Uh-huh. And she has an alterations place, and I'd pay her like, say, $1 a piece. They would open them up, they'd sew our labels in there and everything. And this manufacturer is making them, and they sell them under their brand too. They're just loving it, because I mean, we're now moving a ton of product. And so when I got them, I would have to take all of these upstairs to my loft to put them away. And then as I could only take like 3 boxes at a time, 3 cases at a time, basically I'd take them over there, get all done. I'd go on my lunch break from Harley, go pick them all up and ship out whatever orders I had to ship out on my lunch break, come back and have to put them back away, and then have to bring them back downstairs to pack orders, and, and do all that stuff. And I'm packing all these myself, and now at that time I'm doing like, say, 25 orders a day or so. Mm-hmm. And so then that starts adding up. So basically at that point, I didn't know how to custom manufacture and do cut and sew, but I started kind of learning those processes. And what I did know was that it cost about $70,000 for me to do an opening order on something custom. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have that. So I was really against the idea of borrowing that. I was really against the idea of starting so much in the red. And I figured, what I'm doing right now, is generating income, and I just put away everything that we made, I put away. And so it was, everything at that point that we could do. And then we basically got to a point where one of my buddies that was doing his name's Chris Jones. He's with us today still. He's my first employee. And now he lives in Utah now, with, it's a whole other story. But he basically, I was like, well, do you think you could design plaid? And then he's like, I think we could learn, we could probably figure it out. And I was like, because if we could figure out how to make our own plaids, I'm looking at all these plaids and they're just not going to work. If they're going to make this custom and this fabric has to be right, then we got to go forward with that. So that kind of spawned this whole year process of us making those products. And, the good thing is that we already had this other thing going, so it was okay. And we were doing okay in sales, but we were like, we need to get our own custom piece and not being relying on getting blanks, not having to rely on, on basically someone else's business to be able to feed our business. We need to be able to make our own stuff. And if we did that, then we could get it next level, because now I know all the improvements that I would make of this stuff, and so that started a long process. And I would say that that's a very hard thing for a lot of businesses, because a lot of them are starting at zero and they don't have those sales yet. And we're somewhat lucky at this point that we had these blanks to be able to manufacture out of and to be able to sell as we're building a business, and we're able to test markets, so that market test right there is showing, hey, we have a viable, like there's an audience out there for us. And this is about, probably about 5 years ago now. So those first 2 years, we didn't make anything custom, but got our feet wet in learning how to do all those ins and outs. And then after that, we explored different factories. We went through a lot of middleman situations where we were probably paying for way too much, and learned a lot about that in the time being. And, after it was all said and done, I had my brother-in-law actually does all our sourcing and everything now. And he traveled, because our stuff is Vinyl Productions overseas, as far as our cut and sew stuff. Yep. So he, that factory now, my wife's uncle owns a religious goods company, and they make clergy shirts and all kinds of stuff like that. And I was able to meet one of his factory owners, and then we started meeting a couple others that, their brothers, uncles, cousins, whatnot, that are also factory owners. And then basically got to the point where then I had someone to be able to go out and visit all those factories. And now they come and visit us as well. So we get to see them a couple times a year. They come out here and they see us a couple times a year. And we've made a great relationship with them over the years, to the point where now we have so many factories making different stuff that, at this point, we haven't stopped, because I love learning the new products of how to make them, so that if anything ever did happen, my plan B is I know how to make anything at this point,
So at what point did you stop working at Harley? How many shirts were you selling then?
So that was awesome too, because as I'm working at Harley, I have a lot of customers now. Like, they'll walk in if they see me in the showroom or something, like, hey dude, do you remember me? I met you a long time ago. I was buying shirts from you in the parking lot at Harley. And so like, I would just tell people, like, on Instagram, hey, well, yeah, if you're local, come meet me there, Yeah. So I stopped working at Harley. It's been just over 4 years now. So I worked there for the first 2 years that we moved here. And it was, I'm not going to lie to you, like, during that process of us learning how to do that custom stuff, I was almost over it. I was like, I have this great thing here now. Like, now I'm running a service shop that is rated one of the top 5 service centers in the country. And, and it's, out of 800 Harley shops, and I was taking my job very seriously. It's everything I do, I'm going to take that so seriously, especially if it's sales driven. And I was like, I ended up at the point where I told my wife, like, we were laying in bed one night, and I was like, I'm like, if I can make $120,000 here a year, like, that's comfortable in Arizona. Maybe I should do it. Like, maybe I don't need to be on the internet doing all this stuff. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably reach that point where you're just like, is this all worth it? You know, it's like, what am I doing? You know, I've been working these 2 jobs and having a side hustle for so long.